The film opened with a flashback. Young Madeline Swan tended to her ailing mother while a masked man approached their home. Madeline saw the man at the window and ran to hide. The man entered the house, introduced himself to her mother as Lucifer Safin, and said he was there for Mr. White, who had killed Safin's family. When Madeline's mother couldn't give him an answer, Safin shot her to death. Madeline hid under her bed. When Safin approached, she shot him. She cried watching her mom gone, then dragged Safin's seemingly lifeless body outside. To her shock, Safin was still alive. Madeline ran across the icy lake until she fell through. Safin, unable to let her die, shot the ice and pulled her out. Jump to the present, where Madeline was living romantically with James Bond in Matera.
You okay? We have all the time.
Although they were happy together, Madeline knew Bond still had lingering thoughts about Vesper Lind, who was buried nearby. She encouraged him to let Vesper go, just as she did with her memory of Safin by writing a masked man in French on a piece of paper and burning it. The next morning, Bond went to Vesper's tomb to finally apologize. He had a piece of paper that said "Forgive me" on it, and burned it like Madeline did the previous night. Before leaving, Bond saw a Spectre calling card nearby. Seconds later, the tomb exploded. Bond recovered quickly and started running. Assassins, led by a man with a cybernetic eye called Primo, also known as Cyclops, pursued him.
Blofeld sends Madeline. She's a dope.
Bond raced back to his room on a motorcycle to get Madeline, accusing her of setting him up since the assassins shouldn't have known his location. He got Madeline into the Aston Martin, and they sped off in a high-speed chase across Matera. There was a wild chase with the assassins, and Bond and Madeline were eventually cornered in the middle of the square. The assassins were shooting at Bond's car. Madeline begged Bond to do something. After a quick pause, Bond activated the car's machine guns and took out the assassins. They managed to escape. Bond then dropped Madeline off at the train station and told her to leave. He just didn't trust her anymore. She tearfully tried to catch him as the train began to depart, but he was already gone. 5 years later, another team of assassins broke into an MI6 lab. They were working under Safin, who contacted head scientist Valdo Abrachev and warned him about their arrival. The assassins took Abrachev and another scientist captive, killing the rest of the team. Their objective was to acquire Heracles, a deadly bioweapon that acted as a poison through skin-to-skin contact. After securing Heracles, the assassins killed the other scientists and escaped with Abrachev. MI6 caught wind of the incident, prompting Moneypenny to discuss it with them. He remained tight-lipped about the details of Heracles and demanded to know the whereabouts of 007. Bond had retired from MI6 and was now living in Jamaica. One day, he ran into Felix Leiter and his colleague Logan Ash, who were CIA agents. They went to a nightclub, where Felix informed Bond about Abrachev's capture and the lab break-in. Felix asked Bond for help in bringing Abrachev back, but Bond showed little interest in getting involved. Felix convinced Bond he needed his help because he was the only one Felix trusted. Bond shared his suspicion about Ash, mentioning that Ash's frequent smiles made him wary. After all this talk, Bond said, "Nice to see you again, Felix," before walking away. "Do you remember who he was?" "That's right, Primo." As Bond tried to leave, he found his car wasn't working. That's when a woman named Nomi approached him, offering a ride on her motorcycle.
Voila.
They talked about Nomi's job, and she said she worked as a diver for old Rex. Back at his place, she dropped her facade and revealed that she had been a 00 agent for 2 years. Nomi made it clear that Abrachev was her target, and warned Bond to stay out of her way. Bond asked Nomi to pass on his regards to M but made it clear he wasn't working for him anymore. Nomi tossed her phone to Bond, telling him to call M himself. Before leaving, she revealed she wasn't just any old 00, but the new 007. Meanwhile, M and Bill Tanner discussed retrieving stolen files from the lab with Q. Bond called M, saying he met the new 007 and asking about Abrachev. M told him to stay out of it, saying it wasn't his concern. Bond said it was because it involved Spectre. After Bond questioned what M had done, M suddenly hung up. M then told Bill that he wanted to call Blofeld, who was locked up in Belmarsh and was seen talking to himself. After thinking it over, Bond called Felix to say he wanted to join him. Felix then asked Bond to rendezvous with a young woman in Santiago, Cuba. There, he met a CIA agent named Paloma, who invited Bond to a wine cellar. Bond proposed they get to know each other a bit before starting the mission, but she said no and handed him a suit to change into right away. They teamed up to infiltrate a Spectre party. When they got a drink, Paloma put an earpiece in Bond's ear. Bond asked her to remind him to get Felix a cigar. She looked thirsty and nervous at the same time. Meanwhile, Abrachev was coerced into setting up Heracles at the party, but he secretly swapped the USB containing the data with one hidden in his sock. Primo was sure Abrachev did his job right. Blofeld was watching the whole thing from prison using a robotic eye like Primo's. Bond told Paloma that the Spectre agents were also using earpieces. When she asked who the birthday boy was, Bond said it was Blofeld, who was in prison in London. Bond knew for sure because he put him there. Blofeld spoke through his robotic eyes, and everyone there turned their focus to Bond.
Goodbye, James.
Unexpectedly, the Heracles poison was released, intended to kill Bond but instead affecting only the Spectre agents, causing them to develop fatal boils and collapse. Bond and Paloma remained unharmed. Abrachev mistakenly thought Paloma was his escort before Bond spotted him. As Abrachev tried to escape, Bond and Paloma chased him down. Bond grabbed the USB just before they faced off against some gunmen. They were startled by a falling lamp, which turned out to be Nomi, who had brought Abrachev with her. Paloma asked Bond to get Abrachev while she held off the gunmen. Can we all agree that Paloma was captivating? They took a break for a drink, and Bond doubted that Paloma had just 3 weeks of training. Later, while Bond and Nomi were still in a shootout with the gunmen, Paloma grabbed a car and saw Abrachev trying to escape. She rammed the car into the structure he was climbing down, causing it to collapse onto the car, crushing Abrachev. Bond checked to see if Paloma was okay, then caught Abrachev. They all left when the police arrived. Nomi, still stuck on the second floor, shot a power pole nearby to create a distraction. They said goodbye to Paloma, who hoped Bond would stick around longer next time and gave him a cigar for Felix. Bond then escaped with Abrachev in Nomi's rickety plane. Bond brought Abrachev to Felix's boat to meet with him and Ash.
Into a trap.
Sit.
As they began interrogating Abrachev about Heracles and why it didn't affect Bond, Ash became nervous and intervened, telling Abrachev to stop talking. Abrachev revealed he had altered the DNA sample to target Spectre instead of Bond and mentioned that M had helped create Heracles. When Bond questioned how Blofeld knew his location, he realized that Ash was a double agent working with Abrachev. Felix got shot and fell below deck. Ash and Bond kept fighting. Alberchev kicked the gun to Ash, who grabbed it, and Bond dodged by heading downstairs. Ash locked the door and told Alberchev he was with Safin. Bond tried to save Felix while Ash planted a time bomb on the ship's wall. Bond mentioned Paloma had given him a cigar, and he was going to smoke it. Just as Bond looked for a way out, the ship exploded. Ash and Alberchev escaped by plane. Bond did his best to save Felix, saying they'd been through worse. Felix told Bond to let him go, asking him to make it worth it. Accepting his fate, Felix urged Bond to leave. Bond watched his best friend one last time, reluctantly left him behind, and escaped the sinking ship. He found a float and survived, holding the cigar he was going to give Felix, and waited for help. Bond went back to MI6 to confront M and demanded to see Blofeld at Belmarsh, but M turned him down. Bond explained that Blofeld's plan to kill him in Cuba was hijacked, leading to Spectre's downfall, and that he could identify who took Alberchev. M asked what Bond wanted in return, and Bond insisted on meeting Blofeld. M refused, saying no one had access and there was no proof Alberchev was working with anyone else. After a heated argument, M told Bond to leave. M called in Nomi and instructed her to thoroughly scan everything in Blofeld's cell, including Blofeld himself. As Bond left, Moneypenny offered her help. That night they visited Q at his home where he was preparing dinner for his boyfriend. Bond asked Q to check out the flash disk he brought. Q discovered that the disk contained a DNA database of Spectre members, all of whom had been removed except Blofeld. There were also thousands of other DNA samples from individuals worldwide. Bond asked Q to get him access to Belmarsh to see Blofeld, but Moneypenny said only one person had access. This confused Bond, as M had said no one did. Moneypenny and Q were surprised that M hadn't told Bond this, and Bond pushed for an answer. Meanwhile, Madeline went to her job as a psychiatrist. In her office, she encountered Safin, initially unaware of his identity until he revealed his broken mask. He intimidated her, stating he had saved her life and now needed her help in return. At first, Madeline refused, but Safin threatened to kill someone she loved. M told Bond that Blofeld would only talk to Madeline Swan, aware of Bond's history with her but couldn't dig up more info. Bond mentioned that Madeline was good at keeping secrets. Bond met with the entire MI6 team to be reinstated as a 00 agent. They reviewed files on a Spectre operative's funeral where 5 family members had died from the Heracles poison. M explained that Heracles was initially designed to target individuals through skin contact without harming others, but it had been weaponized with nanobots to affect anyone connected to the targets. M then approved Bond's request to meet with Blofeld for information. Bond gave Nomi a hint: if she wanted to find Alberchev, she should find Logan Ash. Bond then went to Belmarsh and reunited with Madeline. Tanner, knowing about their history, warned Bond to stay cool. Bond said he would, but you can see what his eyes are really saying. He tried to shake her hand, but she rejected it. This scene was so awkward. Imagine meeting your unforgettable ex after 5 years. Only the two of them entered while Tanner and Nomi watched from behind a one-way mirror. When Blofeld was brought out, Madeline became visibly nervous and attempted to leave. Bond tried to stop her, but she pulled away and left them alone. Bond engaged in a tense conversation with Blofeld, who taunted him and claimed responsibility for setting up the attack at Vesper's tomb to make Bond believe Madeline had betrayed him. Provoked to anger, Bond grabbed Blofeld. When Tanner came in to stop Bond, they saw Blofeld dying from the poison on Bond's touch. Bond discovered he'd been infected with Heracles after touching Madeline, and there wasn't a cure. Madeline had disappeared from her apartment, prompting Bond to search for her alone. He tracked her to her childhood home. Bond told her that Blofeld said she didn't betray him. He came to find out who gave Madeline the poison and to let her know how much he loved her, and still does. He didn't regret anything that led him to her, except putting her on that train 5 years ago. While they were kissing, he found out she had a daughter named Matilda. Madeline denied Matilda was his, but Bond was skeptical because Matilda had blue eyes. Madeline kept insisting Matilda was not his. She said she had something to tell him.
Another child?
Madeline revealed Safin's backstory to Bond. Blofeld had ordered Madeline's father to kill Safin's entire family, leaving Safin as the sole survivor with facial disfigurements. Madeline also disclosed that Safin operated from an island once owned by his family. Bond relayed this information to Q, who pinpointed Safin's location to an island between Japan and Russia. Bond asked if Nomi found Ash. Moneypenny sent Nomi's location, close to Bond. He initially thought Nomi was following him, but Moneypenny confirmed she was following Ash. Realizing the danger from Safin's nearby men, Bond quickly got Madeline and Matilda out of the house for safety. On the way, Safin's men chased them. Bond managed to run 2 of them off the road, but more was still coming. He drove into the forest and hid Madeline and Matilda in a small ruined building. Bond had a firefight with the remaining assassins and set a trap. Ash eventually showed up and chased after Bond. A trunk overturned Ash's car, causing a crash. Ash crawled out and asked for help, but Bond, wanting revenge for Felix's death, pushed the car and crushed Ash. When Bond got back to the building, he found that Madeline and Matilda had been kidnapped and taken to Safin's island by a helicopter. A car approached, and Nomi was behind the wheel. She picked up Bond and took him back to MI6. Nomi relinquished the 007 title to Bond as they prepared to head to the island to stop Safin and rescue Madeline and Matilda. Meanwhile, Safin took Madeline and Matilda to his garden, where he grew poisonous plants and harvested nanobots for distributing Heracles' poison. He showed Matilda around, and when she tried to touch a plant, Madeline yelled at her to stop, and she listened. Safin then forced them to separate, with Madeline going off with Primo. Using a special vehicle launched from a plane, Bond and Nomi successfully infiltrated the island. After knocking out the guards multiple times, they captured Obruchev in the lab and planned to blow up the place but lacked sufficient explosives. Bond asked Obruchev where Safin was, and Obruchev pointed upstairs. Meanwhile, Madeline was forced to drink tea. Primo said if she behaved, she could see her daughter. Knowing the flour in the tea could make her blind, she threw the hot tea in his face and managed to escape from Primo. Bond located Safin with Matilda in his captivity. Safin told Bond to sit down in front of him and give up his guns, and Bond agreed. Safin promised if Bond didn't mess with his plans, he wouldn't hurt what Bond cared about. He'd give Matilda back, but Madeline had to stay. Bond wasn't having it. When Safin threatened them, Bond knelt and begged Safin to spare Madeline and Matilda. He secretly pulled out a gun and attacked Safin's guards, but Safin got away with Matilda, and Madeline found Bond afterward. Safin was about to leave when Matilda bit him, and he let her go. Nomi, who was holding Obruchev, lost her temper because he kept babbling. She pushed him into a pool of nanobots, where he dissolved gruesomely. Bond, who had reunited with Madeline, found Matilda hiding under a table. They headed to the basement to escape. Bond put his sweater on Matilda and told Madeline he had to finish things for them. They kissed, not knowing if they'd get another chance. Nomi went with Madeline and Matilda, while Bond stayed behind. He returned upstairs to the control room. He had to open the hatch so the missile could penetrate the facility. Primo attacked Bond, but Bond used Q's gadget watch to disable Primo's cybernetic eye, killing him. Bond opened the hatch doors and asked Q to tell M to launch the missiles. M then called the Royal Navy to destroy Safin's facility with missile strikes. As Bond tried to leave, the hatch door closed again, and Safin appeared and shot him. They fought, and Bond broke Safin's arm. Safin then revealed that he had infected both himself and Bond with nanobots, claiming that anyone they touched would be killed. Hearing this, Bond shot Safin dead. Bond managed to open the hatch doors again, but realized he couldn't leave without risking harm to Madeline and Matilda. Bond contacted Q to ensure Madeline, Matilda, and Nomi were safe. Then he asked to be connected with Madeline. Through the call, she realized what had happened to Bond and said there must be a way, they just needed more time. They shared a poignant moment, reaffirming their love, and Madeline confirmed Matilda was Bond's daughter. Bond then faced the incoming missiles, sacrificing himself to obliterate the facility. The rest of the team realized what had transpired. Back at MI6, M, Tanner, Nomi, Q, and Moneypenny gathered for a toast in Bond's memory. Meanwhile, Madeline drove Matilda to Matera to start a new life. There, she decided to share with Matilda the story of her father, a man named Bond. James Bond. Subscribe for more videos like this. Until next time, take care and see you in the next video.